Hi, I'm Jordan from BulletproofBJJ.com, and in this video we're going to be looking at a very basic respiration drill. And breathing is really important for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is if my breathing is kind of messed up, it'll cause me to tighten up in response to that perceived threat to the nervous system. And this could manifest as tight shoulders, tight neck, tight rib cage, anything basically is around the respiratory apparatus. And in my years working as a trainer, working with hundreds of people, both teaching at certifications and training in the studio here, I don't think I've ever encountered a single person who actually had their breathing completely dialed in. I've worked with a number of people who did a concentrated breathing practice, whether as part of yoga or some other discipline that required a focus on solid breathing mechanics. And in a calm environment, in like a quiet room, they were awesome. As soon as they were stressed, they would often revert back to bad breathing habits. And specific to what we're going to look at today, that meant that they would often start to breathe through their chest again, a lot of rise and fall in the shoulders, understanding that it's okay if there's an expansion in the chest, I just don't want it to move superior. I want to have my breathing down here in my belly, and importantly, mobilizing the rib cage as I breathe. Because if you know, like I have a lot of tension and tightness in my side here, I feel really tight, it might be that you're a chronic chest breather, and so you're not consistently mobilizing everything down here from the musculature all the way down to your internal organs. Like breathing properly actually does mobilize your internal organs. So we're going to look at a couple of simple drills that you can start working on, and I encourage you to pre and post assess these. And you can do this by checking overhead shoulder reach, so shoulder flexion. I can check external and internal rotation, see if they're affected. You can also even check your toe touch. I've had a few clients who got stuck a few inches from the floor, nothing would fix it until they improved their breathing habits, and then they found all of a sudden they just got looser. So the first one we're going to do is a preparatory stretch for the lateral rib cage. All you're going to do is reach up like this, and then think about pushing your rib cage, or if it helps, your hip out to the side and reach like this, and you should feel a big stretch all the way down through here. If you're super tight in your shoulders, you might feel it more up here, or if you're super tight in your hips, you might feel it down there. We'll address all that stuff later. So I'm just going to go back and forth. 5 times should be sufficient. And then on the other side, I'll do the same thing. 5 repetitions. Now next up to the actual breathing practice, I'm going to give myself some tactile feedback by using my thumbs here at the bottom of my rib cage, and then my fingers will go just above something called the ASIS, and this is, just think of this as your front hip bone. So I'll find those 2 points, and now as you breathe, I want to try and stand really tall, breathe in through my nose, and then out through my mouth. So I breathe in through the nose, and you might notice my thumbs just moved there. And that's because as I breathed in, my rib cage expanded out a little bit. And it might help to start thinking of the rib cage as more of a spring. Because it's not a cage, technically speaking, something that's super fixed and doesn't move. It's much more like a spring that should have some inherent mobility about it. And I illustrated this in, I think, the last video, the idea that I should also be able to access certain sections of the rib cage and mobilize them so I start developing more control. For now, super basic, thumbs at the bottom of the rib cage, fingers at the top of the hips, stand tall, breathe in through your nose, expand the belly, and then out through your mouth. I would recommend doing that for 2 to 5 minutes. You can do, if you're, for instance, if you're standing and maybe you